Greetings, my students. Once again, this is your professor, attorney Alfredo L. Mayol III, and today we are going to discuss medical ethics, okay? Taken from the Medical Ethics Manual of the World Medical Association. Last time class, we discussed the introduction, okay, from this manual. So, to continue, we will be discussing Chapter 1, or the principal features of medical ethics. So, the objective of today's discussion is that within the course of our lecture, a medical student would know what is special about medicine. Next, you will learn what is special about medical ethics. Next, who decides what is ethical? Another topic is, does medical ethics change? Okay, is it dynamic? Next, does medical ethics differ from one country to another? Okay, so is a certain principle or a certain concept exclusive to one country, or are they all the same? Next is, what is the role of the World Medical Association? Next topic, how does the World Medical Association decide what is ethical? Okay, so the World Medical Association class is the mother organization of different ethical organization, okay, with regards to medicine. So, their scope is global and international. Next, how do individuals decide what is ethical? And lastly, we will discuss the conclusion of this chapter. Okay? So, we have discussed the introduction. So, let's go now to Chapter 1, the principal features of medical ethics. So, like what I said earlier, after working through this chapter, the medical students should be able to explain why ethics is important to medicine, identify the major sources of medical ethics. Okay, we have discussed that last time. Okay, even the time of antiquity or ancient times, ethics is already present. Okay, at the time of Hippocrates, at the time of the great philosophers, okay, Plato, Aristotle, and so on and so forth. They have already discussed the concept of what is right and what is wrong. Next, recognize different approaches to ethical decision making, including your own. Okay, so it is not only the learning of what is right and what is wrong, okay, the different ethical theories, principles, and concept. What is important is for the doctor, such as yourselves, to apply what you learn, okay, in your practice. Ethical decision making is important. So, without further ado, let us begin. First, what's special about medicine? Okay? All of you are medical students. So, your exposure is in the medical field. Of course, I know as medical students, you want to be a physician, a licensed physician. So, why did you choose this field? What is special about medicine? Okay, so some of these lectures class are matters of reading, and I will read some of the concepts and we will discuss later. By the way, class, if you have questions, just message me anytime. Okay? So throughout almost all of recorded history and in virtually every part of the world, being a physician has meant something special. Okay? So, of course, we have discussed the essence, the importance of being a medical doctor. Okay? You influenced other people. You touch other people's lives. Okay? Because being a doctor, your concern is the life of your patients. People come to physicians for help with their most pressing needs. Okay? Whether patients go to you if they feel something in their body, like ailment, or they have a disease in their body, okay? They want to find a relief from pain and suffering and restoration of health and well-being. So, as doctors, it is incumbent upon you to help your patients to regain not just the physical aspect, but the entirety, okay? The physical, the emotional, okay, the mental. As a doctor, you must be, your concern in treatment should be holistic, okay, in its entirety. Because a disease class is not just physical, okay? So even though a disease, a chronic disease is incurable, say for example, cancer or other incurable diseases, it is not the treatment that matters anymore, but the comforting words of the physician, of the doctor, that the patient will not forget. Okay? So they allow physicians to see, touch, and manipulate every part of their bodies, even the most intimate. Okay, so more often than not, patients that will go to you for treatment, of course, as medical doctors, because you are the expert, they will follow everything you say. Your words are like a gospel truth to them. They do this because they trust their physicians to act in their best interest. Okay? So, the duty given upon you by the society is very heavy. Your actions will affect the life of your patients. And not just your patients, but the community also. So many physicians feel that they are no longer as respected as they once were. Okay? So in the present times, especially because we are in a pandemic, and of course the government wants to control, okay, or prevent the disease from spreading. So sometimes they they do not follow what the experts would say. Okay? So that is why it is important that as physicians, okay, as frontliners, you must be assertive of your knowledge. Be conscious, okay? You must promote health and prevent disease, okay? It is important to work with the legislature, with the executive branch, in order for them to know what is really important to curb or to stop this pandemic. The status of physicians differs from one country to another and even within countries. In general, though it seems to be a deteriorating, many physicians feel that they are no longer as respected as they once were. Okay? So, unlike before where physicians are being praised, okay? In the past, physicians has higher degree of status compared to normal citizens, because of course health being a very important aspect of society. But right now, it is different, especially the government is centralized, okay? And the government officials are not doctors, of course. They come to different background. Some are engineers, other are businessmen. So it is important that physician should play, should the role of the physicians should be expanded, okay? Because pandemic or COVID-19 is a health crisis. So the role of physician is important in stopping this dreaded disease. Okay, so these are just matters of reading, class. The manual are already in the files, so I will just make a rundown. Okay, so to meet the expectation of both patients and students, it is important that physicians know and exemplify the core values of medicine. Okay, so in my previous discussion, I always emphasize that as a physician, it is incumbent upon you to increase your knowledge, skill, and attitude, because it is important that you are abreast of the latest principles, latest technology for your competence, because of course patients go to you for your competence, and they want you to help them get better. So if you are incompetent, so instead of your patient getting better, they will get worse. Okay? So it is important that you increase your skill, your knowledge, and of course, your attitude towards your patients. So, despite these changes impinging on the status of physicians, medicine continues to be a profession that is highly valued by the sick people who need its services. Okay, so like what I said earlier, you are the last resort of the people, of the sick people that wants to get better. It also continues to attract large numbers of the most gifted, hardworking, and dedicated students. Okay, such as yourselves. I know all of you comes from different background. Okay, but what is common is the sacrifice. Okay, I know all of you are unique, okay, gifted, hardworking individuals. And I know you have your reasons why you want to become a medical doctor, okay? But in the final analysis, what is important is that when you become doctors, you must serve humanity, okay? So, what's special about medical ethics? So, although compassion, competence, and autonomy are not exclusive to medicine, physicians are expected to exemplify them to a very high degree. Okay? So, if you are a physician, the diligence required for you is higher compared to other profession or other citizen, because your concern is to touch the lives of your patients. Okay, so compassion is very important. Next is competence. Okay, your skill. So compassion encompasses your attitude. And of course, time and again, we have discussed autonomy or self-determination. It is the core value of medicine that has changed the most over the years. Okay, so we have discussed this concept from our previous lectures. Okay. So, to exemplify the different doctrines, different principle of medicine, the World Medical Association has made a declaration, which is the Declaration of Geneva. Okay? So, in this declaration, class, the principles are already integrated or inculcated in this Geneva Declaration. And I will read the World Medical Association Declaration of Geneva. At the time of being admitted as a member of the medical profession, I solemnly pledge to consecrate my life to the service of humanity. Okay? So, when you become doctor, your duty is to serve humanity. Okay? You are a friend to mankind. I will give to my teachers the respect and gratitude that is their due. So, sense of respect, honesty, respectability are integrated in this provision. Next, I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. The health of my patient will be my first consideration. Okay, so your concern is to touch the lives of your patient, to make them feel better, to improve their lives. Okay, so last time, remember, we discussed that in the hierarchy of in the hierarchy of rights, the right to life is the highest. Okay? I will respect the secrets that are confided in me even after the patient has died. Okay, that's very important, class. And it has legal implications also. I will maintain by all means in my power the honor and the noble traditions of the medical profession. My colleagues will be my sisters and brothers. I will not permit considerations of age, disease, or disability, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other factor to intervene between my duty and my patient. Okay? As a medical doctor class, you are a friend to mankind. So, whatever status or background your patient belongs, you must respect and accept it. Okay? I will maintain the utmost respect for human life. I will not use my medical knowledge to violate human rights and civil liberties, even under threat. Lastly, I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor. Okay? So, this Declaration of Geneva, class, is like an oath to physicians. Okay? And different ethical considerations or ethical principles, doctrines, and concepts are integrated in this oath. Okay? So, as a medical doctor, you must adhere to the Declaration of Geneva. Okay? So, this is like a guiding principle, a guiding that will guide young doctors or the medical profession, okay, to the right path. Next, who decides what is ethical? So, as a general rule, class, ethics is pluralistic. Okay, it is very broad. It is encompassing. Okay, we have discussed that time and time again. Ethics is the study of what is right and what is wrong. And of course, class, when you say what is right and what is wrong, these are general terms, broad terms. It has no definition. Individuals disagree among themselves about what is right and what is wrong, and even when they agree, it can be for different reasons. Okay? So, in some societies, this disagreement is regarded as normal, and there is a great deal of freedom to act however one wants, as long as it does not violate the rights of others. Okay? So what is essential, class, is that when you exercise your right, it does not violate also the right of other people. Okay? So in more traditional societies, however, there is greater agreement on ethics and greater social pressure, sometimes backed by laws, to act in certain ways rather than in such society. Culture and religion often play a dominant role in determining ethical behavior. Okay? Sometimes, class, the ethics in a country is a case-to-case basis. Okay? Depending on the culture, depending on the tradition. Okay? Because all of us are unique. For example, Gulyas College of Medicine. You know that at least 15 nationalities are studying in Gulyas College. Okay? 50 nationalities composed of course, the dominant students with dominant numbers are Indians. Okay? Filipinos, Lebanese, Arabians, Koreans, Chinese, okay? Vietnamese, and so on and so forth. So in your respective country, of course, you have your own principles, own definition of what is right and what is wrong, especially based on your religious precepts or your laws, okay, in the land. So these are just matters of reading, class. Despite these differences, it seems that most human beings can agree on some fundamental ethical principles. Okay? So, though there are differences due to the upbringing or due to the practice in a certain countries, however, there are similarities. Okay? Namely, the basic human rights proclaimed in the United Nations or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, so there are common concepts, fundamental ideas that we share. Okay, as a general rule. And other widely accepted and officially endorsed document. Okay, these are the generally accepted principle of international laws. Okay, for example, the rules as promulgated by the United Nations. Okay, from the World Health Organization, from the World Medical Association. Okay, these are fundamental principles, okay, which is common to which is common in our countries and is widely accepted and officially endorsed by many medical organization. Okay? So the human rights that are especially important for medical ethics include the right to life. Okay, we have discussed that. Right to life being the highest right in the hierarchy of rights. Okay? To freedom from discrimination, torture, and cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. So, it's fundamental also. It is a protected right. It is an international concern. Next, to freedom of opinion and expression. Next, to equal access to public service in one's country and to medical care. Okay? So, the question now begs, who decides what is ethical? Okay? So, for the physicians, who decides what is ethical, what is not ethical? So, has until recently had somewhat different answer than for people in general. So over centuries, the medical profession has developed its own standards of behavior for its members, which are expressed in the codes of ethics and related policy document. Okay? So like what I said earlier, there are similar principles which are common to all countries, class. And these fundamental principles are being promulgated, okay, being declared by international organization like the World Medical Association. Okay, for example, the Declaration of Geneva, Declaration of Helsinki, Declaration of Taipei. Okay, so these are general principles being used by different countries. Okay, and I also included it in your files class. So please check it out. So, the World Medical Association has set forth a broad range of ethical statements that specify the behavior required of physicians, no matter where they live and practice. In many, if not most countries, medical associations have been responsible for developing and enforcing the applicable ethical standards, depending on the country's approach to medical law. Okay? So, these standards may have legal status. Okay? So, these are just matters of reading. The medical profession's privilege of being able to determine its own ethical standards has never been absolute. Okay? So, even though they have their own rules, the international organization, like the World Medical Association, however, it is not absolute. Okay? Other medical organization in a country, in your respective country, can have your own. Okay? Can have your own code of ethics, can have your own code of professional responsibility. Okay? For example, physicians have always been subject to the general laws of the land and have sometimes been punished for acting contrary to these laws. Okay? So like what I said earlier, your law in your respective places also determines morality or ethics. Okay? For example, other countries, abortion is accepted. However, in the Philippines, abortion is illegal. Okay? So, of course, it will also affect our ethical considerations. Okay? Another concept is euthanasia. Okay, mercy killing. In other countries, euthanasia is illegal. Okay, in the Philippines, euthanasia is illegal. In other parts of the world, it is accepted. Okay? Some medical organizations are strongly influenced by religious teachings, which impose additional obligation on their members besides those applicable to all physicians. Of course, religion plays a role, okay, in a country. For example, in the Philippines, it is a Catholic-dominated country. Okay, I think 80% of the populations are Catholic. Okay, in the Middle East, it is a Muslim-dominated country. Okay, so of course, the principles, ethical consideration may vary due to the background, okay, religious background, political background of a country. So in many countries, the organizations that set the standards for physician behavior and monitor their compliance now have a significant non-physician membership. Okay? So now it becomes a case-to-case basis. Okay? So in making decisions, it is helpful to know what other physicians would do in similar situations. Next question, does medical ethics change? Okay? So there can be little doubt that some aspects of medical ethics have changed over the years. Medical ethics class is dynamic. Okay? It is not stagnant. It changes. Okay? Like what I said, it is a case-to-case basis. Okay? For example, the country has a political background. Okay? Has a religious background. So, it depends on the situation of the country. Okay? So, until recently, physicians had the right and the duty to decide how patients should be treated, and there was no obligation to obtain patient-informed consent. Okay? So that was before. But right now, informed consent is a doctrine which is mandatory. Okay? Especially for patients undergoing invasive procedures. Okay? So, medical ethics is dynamic class. It is ever changing. Different accountabilities can conflict with one another. Okay? So, of course, the doctrine of accountability is important in the practice of medicine, and we have discussed that countless of times. Okay? Medical ethics has changed in other ways. Participation in abortion was forbidden in medical codes of ethics until recently, but now is tolerated under certain conditions by the medical profession in many countries. Okay, so we have discussed that earlier. The laws also affect the ethics in a particular country. Okay, so for example, abortion is illegal here. However, abroad, it is accepted. Okay? Does medical ethics differ from one country to another? We have discussed that. It is a case-to-case basis depending on the background of a country. Okay? Political, religious, the law of the land. It plays a vital role in ethics. Now, let's go to the role of the World Medical Association. So, as the only international organization that seeks to represent all physicians regardless of nationality or specialty, the World Medical Association has undertaken the role of establishing general standards in medical ethics that are applicable worldwide. Okay, so they collect different principles in medicine, okay, so that they can promulgate declarations that will serve as guidelines for other medical organizations. Okay, for example, Declaration of Geneva, Declaration of Helsinki, okay, International Code of Medical Ethics, and so on and so forth. The World Medical Association has undertaken the role of establishing general standards and medical ethics that are applicable worldwide, okay? Because they are considered to be the mother organization of other medical organization. How does the World Medical Association decide what is ethical? So, achieving international agreement on controversial ethical issues is not an easy task, even within a relatively cohesive group such as the physicians. Okay? So, World Medical Association class is composed of different members worldwide. Okay? So, they present their respective ideas, their respective argument, so that they can compile this general principle into a single document for the purpose of that will serve as guidelines or guideposts for other international or other local medical associations. Okay, so the World Medical Association ensures that its ethical policy statements reflects a consensus by requiring a 75% vote in favor of any new or revised policy at its annual assembly. Okay? So, achieving international agreement on controversial ethical issues is not an easy task. Okay? They have to vote for that. And the members of the World Medical Association comprises of different stakeholders around the world. Okay? Classic example, Declaration of Helsinki, which concerns human research. On some issues, the position of physicians may have to be promoted forcefully against those of governments, health system administrators, and or commercial enterprises. Okay? because you are the experts, you are the frontliners. For example, our fight for COVID-19 pandemic, okay? So, our responses like lockdowns, okay, and other health protocols are because of the suggestions of the different doctors or different experts from their field. So how do individuals decide what is ethical? So for individual physicians and medical students, medical ethics does not consist simply in following the recommendation of the World Medical Association or other medical organizations. So as a student class, as a practicing doctor later on, you must use your own experience, okay? Use your critical thinking, coupled with experience to this in your decision making, okay? In your approach in a ethical dilemma. So individuals are ultimately responsible for making their own ethical decision and for implementing them. However, guidelines from the World Medical Association is also important. Okay? So that you can weigh properly your decision. Okay? Non-rational approaches in the application. Okay? In how you solve an ethical dilemma or ethical problem is first obedience. Okay? Obey what is given by the authority. For example, the guidelines from the World Medical Association. Okay? You obey it. Obedience is a common way of making ethical decisions, especially by children and those who work within authoritarian structure. Okay? Next, imitation is similar to obedience in that it subordinates one's judgment about right and wrong to that of another person, in this case a role model. Okay? So of course, for example, in the Philippines, we follow the health protocols of other countries who are successful in their fight with regards to COVID-19. Okay? Next, a feeling or desire is a subjective approach to moral decision making and behavior. Okay? Another is the gut feeling or intuition. Is an immediate perception of the right way to act in a situation. Next is habit. Okay? So habit is a very efficient method of moral decision making since there is no need to repeat a systematic decision making process each time a moral issue arises similar to one that has been dealt with previously. Okay? So these are just matters of reading, class. Next, what are the rational approaches? So there are certain ethical principles that will help you decide. Okay? And we have discussed this time and time again. The ontology, okay, involves a search for well-founded rules that can serve as the basis for moral decisions. Okay? An example of such rule is treat all people as equals. Okay? So its foundation may be religious. For example, the belief that all God's human creatures are equal. Or non-religious. For example, human beings share almost all of the same genes. Okay, so we have discussed that time and time again. Next is consequentialism. Bases ethical decision making on an analysis of the likely consequences or outcome of different choices and actions. Okay, we have discussed that also. It is like an outcome-based decision making from the word itself, consequence. Okay, consequentialism. One of the best known forms of consequentialism is utilitarianism. Okay, the word itself from utility. Okay, so as its measure and defines this as the greatest good for the greatest number. Next is principalism, as its name implies, uses ethical principles as the basis for making a moral decisions. Okay, so you utilize the different ethical theories, ethical doctrines, and principles in making a decision. Virtue ethics, we have discussed that, different virtues you utilized in order to come up with a sound decision. um, your decision making is based on your virtues, okay, your principles, your beliefs. So class, in chapter 2, basically we have discussed the general principles in ethics that would help you or a physician arrive at a sound decision making. Okay? So it would attempt to ensure that the behavior of the decision maker, both in coming to a decision and implementing its admirable virtue ethics, such a process could comprise the following steps. So in virtue ethics class, the following steps are utilized. Okay, first, determine whether the issue at hand is an ethical one. Next, consult authoritative sources such as medical association, codes of ethics, policies, respective colleagues to see how physicians generally deal with such issue. Okay, if you determine that the dilemma is an ethical issue, then of course you consult your seniors or medical associations on how they deal with this certain issue. Then consider alternative solution in light of the principles and values they uphold and their likely consequences. Next is to discuss your proposed solution with those whom it will affect, okay, the stakeholders. And then make your decision and act on it with sensitivity to others affected. Lastly, evaluate your decision and be prepared to act differently in the future if it calls for different action. Okay? So, these are the steps which are involved in virtue ethics. So, I think we have covered chapter 2. So, I will read the conclusion. I hope you learned something. So, chapter 2, class. This chapter sets the stage for what follows. When dealing with specific issues in medical ethics, it is good to keep in mind that physicians have faced many of the same issues throughout history and that their accumulated experience and wisdom can be very valuable today. Okay? So, the fundamental principles class is because of the years, okay, of experience of your predecessors, the doctors before you, since ancient times. Okay, the time of Hippocrates, the time of other doctors in different countries. So the World Medical Association and other medical organizations carry on this tradition and provide much helpful ethical guidance to physicians. However, despite a large measure of consensus among physicians on ethical issues, individuals can and do disagree on how to deal with specific cases. Okay? So, even though these are general principles that will guide an organization, but still, it is a case-to-case basis. It's up to you. If you are a physician later on, it depends on your values, depends on your background, depends on your religious belief. Okay? It plays a role in your decision making. Okay? Moreover, the views of physicians can be quite different from those of patients and of other healthcare providers. As a first step in resolving ethical conflicts, it is important for physicians to understand different approaches to ethical decision making, okay, including their own, and those of the people with whom they are interacting. Okay, so once again, it is a case-to-case basis. This will help them determine for themselves the best way to act and to explain their decision to others. So what is important, class, is as medical doctors, you arrive at a sound decision in order to help your patients. Okay. However, there are fundamental rules, okay, from the World Medical Association, from the World Health Organization, from your local medical organizations that will help you, that will guide you in coming to a sound decision. Okay? So, I think in this chapter, we end. So, if you have any question, class, feel free to message me. But before we end our lecture, let us end our day with a prayer. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Okay? Thank you, class, for listening. I hope you learned something from this lecture. And if you have questions, class, please message me. Okay? So, thank you, class. God bless us all.